Hey guys, and welcome to episode 13 of the Brighton Jazz School podcast. And I've just realised it's Friday the 13th today, and kid you not, but I'm recording this at 1 p.m. on Friday the 13th. So it's the 13th hour of the 13th day, and it happens to be the 13th episode. Ooh, spooky. But so far nothing has gone wrong, so in fact everything's going extremely well, and we've got a fascinating show for you today. We've got all the usual sections: album of the week, passing notes, track of the week, and all that sort of stuff, but I'm dedicating the show to one of the greatest trumpet players of all time. And during his lifetime he worked with everyone from Herbie Hancock and Wayne Shorter to Billy Joel and Lalo Schifrin, so a huge scope of different musicians, different styles. But he's also appeared on many of the classic Blue Note albums of the 60s. And in my view, he's just one of the greatest jazz musicians of all time. And his name, of course, is Freddie Hubbard. And I'm going to be talking to his son, Duane, a bit later on about his dad and the impact of the music and what's happening today in terms of the Freddie Hubbard estate. So before that gets underway, let's get started with Album of the Week. We're going to take quite an in-depth look at a Freddie Hubbard album called Hubtones, which was recorded in 1962 and released on the Blue Note label. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the rest of the show. So welcome to Album of the Week, and this week, as I said, we're checking out Hubtones, which is an album by Freddie Hubbard, and that was recorded in 1962. And during that time, Freddie Hubbard was a full-time member of Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers, and he somehow managed to find the time to record 3 solo albums, The Artistry of Freddie Hubbard, and that was on Impulse, and then 2 albums for Blue Note, Here to Stay, and this one we're checking out, Hubtones. I think on Hubtones, Freddie's a little bit more, daring in his approach. Certainly for me, Here to Stay is very much coming out of the Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers sound, whereas this one is slightly more freer. It's got more elements borrowing from free jazz. I mean, I'm not saying that this music is free, it's not at all, and it's firmly in the classic sort of Blue Note sound, but there is definitely an element that is much more freer than Here to Stay. So that's quite an interesting thing to listen out for. The material is great, as ever. We've got, it starts with a standard, You're My Everything, which is a great song, and you really hear the full extent of Freddie's amazing tone and the different textures and timbres that he can get. Incidentally, there has been a re-release of this album, and it's really worth getting because there's alternative takes which are really worth checking out. There's an alternate version of You're My Everything, which is great. So and the rest of the tunes are actually Freddie Hubbard compositions. Prophet Jennings is the next one, Hubtones, Lament for Booker, For Spee's Sake, which is a real hard-hitting, heavy kind of tour de force rounding off the album. So I'm going to play you a little bit of the title track, Hubtones, which is absolutely fantastic. And it features some of the great players. We've got James Spaulding, Herbie Hancock, Reggie Workman, Clifford Jarvis. So these are classic Blue Note artists and playing at their best. So check this out. This is Hubtones. go. What a great solo by Freddie Hubbard there. And you'll notice, well, the musicians should notice, the musician listeners should know that that's a 12-bar blues. But it's, the head, as it were, the main melody with the introduction, quite complex, those rhythmic sort of figures over the crotchet groove there. It's quite a complex thing. Great tune, but just fantastic solo by Freddie. I think that's one of my favourite solos of his. I transcribed that years ago, and there's really quite a lot involved. The language of the music, certain concepts and things that a lot of hard bop players do, and a lot of which was actually sort of originates from Freddie Hubbard. He developed the language from bebop into this sort of style of trumpet playing. Through his influences, which were Miles, obviously, Lee Morgan, and most importantly, Clifford Brown. In fact, there's quite a nice story that I remember reading. Freddie Hubbard was doing a gig somewhere in New York, I think it was the Vanguard, and he was heavily influenced by Miles Davis at that time, and Miles was actually in the audience, and he came up to Freddie afterwards and said, "Hey man, why don't you start playing your own stuff?" And from what I read, that was a real turning point for Freddie, because then he started to then branch out and develop his own sound, as opposed to just purely copying someone or imitating someone. And that's an important part, and I think an integral part of growing as a jazz musician. And that's one thing that really strikes me with Freddie Hubbard, is that he never stood still for a second. He was always trying to develop his sound and develop what he was able to offer the music world. I mean, he's so eclectic. I mean, he was sort of playing with Art Blakey and the Messengers sort of sound. Then he developed his own Blue Note sort of sound with Herbie Hancock and McCoy. Then he recorded on Oliver Nelson's album The Blues and the Abstract Truth in 1961, which is a landmark album. He was also on Herbie Hancock's Maiden Voyage in 1965. He was also on Wayne Shorter's Speak No Evil in 1965. And, all of those records are absolute landmark records. They're in every jazz musician's collection, and if you don't know any of them, you should. They're the three, I would say, that probably the most important albums of the 60s. And he, in fact, recorded 28 albums as a sideman for Blue Note, and he recorded 8 as a leader for Blue Note as well. So it was a really prolific time for Freddie. He was also involved in the free jazz movement, appearing again on landmark albums. Ornette Coleman's Free Jazz, a collective improvisation, which was recorded in 1960. The fantastic Out to Lunch by Eric Dolphy, recorded in 64. And of course Ascension, which is one of my favourite albums by John Coltrane, recorded in 65. And then he then went on to record albums like Red Clay and First Light in the early 70s, which won him a Grammy, I think, the First Light in 71. Touring with Herbie Hancock's VSOP group, which pretty much made up Miles Davis's band, the famous quintet, which includes Wayne Shorter, Herbie, Tony Williams and Ron Carter. In the 80s he was playing, but he had a serious injury with his lip that got infected, and he stopped playing the trumpet for a while, and he returned. Some say he lost the fiery tone and the technique, but I mean the element of lyricism and just his refined style was certainly there, right up until the end. And it's undoubtable that he is just a hugely important figure in jazz, and he brought so much to the music and transformed the music and trumpet playing forever. So back to the album Hubtones, I want to play you the ballad of the album, and this is called Lament for Booker, and it features some absolutely exquisite trumpet playing by Freddie Hubbard, and the opening sort of theme is sort of weaving in and out. You can hear Spaulding playing the flute there, weaving in and out, quite delicately done, very tasteful, in and out of the main melody. And Herbie Hancock's playing but is particularly good on this, the comping. But just to highlight Freddie's ability to compose, and listen out for his amazing tone and all the signature things that make Freddie Hubbard great. So this is Lament for Booker. important to say that as well as just being a fantastic player, Freddie was a really supremely talented composer, and many of his tunes are now sort of what we call jazz standards. Just trying to think of a few off the top of my head. Red Clay, Up Jump Spring, Little Sunflower, Bird-like, Intrepid Fox, and many more. Just absolutely spot-on compositions by Freddie Hubbard, and they still sound fresh and they still sound exciting and modern today. And that's that they've stood the test of time, and I think they'll always be around. They'll always be in that bag of exceptional writing, with up there with Herbie Hancock and Wayne Shorter. And of course he was a big influence on many younger trumpet players, up-and-coming trumpet players. Most notably Wynton Marsalis, who says that he has a big sound and has a sense of rhythm, great sense of rhythm and time, and really the hallmark of his playing is an exuberance. His playing is exuberant. So yeah, that sort of fire, the intensity there is a big part of what Freddie Hubbard was about. But having said that, Chris Botti says something else. He says it's about the sound that he gets on just one note. I know he does all this flashy stuff and the high stuff, which is great, but he'd play body and soul on the flugelhorn, and it was just that much better than everybody else. So he really was able to do everything. He could play these high, fast, complex tunes, and yet he could really be lyrical and play, from the heart and put lots of soul into the playing. So that's, I think, one of the reasons why he's regarded so highly, because he could literally do it all. On top of that, he's a great composer. So yeah, so he was working right up until the last sort of 10 years of his life, where he split his lip. He was doing a lot of gigs in succession, and he wasn't taking care of himself, and his lip got infected, and he never really regained the sort of technical fluency that he had in his younger years. But he took some time off and started to play again, and was starting to sound good. But unfortunately he died, he had a heart attack in November of 2008, and he sadly passed away on December 29th, 2008. So the world lost not only a great trumpet player, but a prolific composer and one of the great voices in jazz. What more can I say? The great Freddie Hubbard. So there we go. So check out Hubtones, and in fact check out anything with Freddie Hubbard on it, either as a sideman or as a leader. They're all great. So this has been Album of the Week. Please check out Hubtones by Freddie Hubbard. And don't go away, because we've got the most fascinating interview coming up with Freddie's son, Duane, who's going to talk to us about Freddie, and going to talk to us about what it was like growing up with a superstar jazz playing father, and life after Freddie. Freddie has since departed this world, but he's left behind a huge legacy of recorded material and unreleased material. And so we're going to talk to Duane about how he spends his time, how he coordinates and re-releases tracks and gets them remastered, and all sorts of really fascinating things. So don't go away, and we'll see you again next week on Album of the Week. Alright guys, so welcome to the artist interview. This week we're very privileged to have Mr. Duane Hubbard, who's Freddie Hubbard's son, and it's a great pleasure to be talking to you. Welcome, Duane. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Wayne. Great to be here.
What was it like growing up with, Freddie Hubbard as your dad, a famous jazz musician? How was that growing up?
I kind of knew it was kind of different early on. He would leave every so often. The bags would be in front of the door, and then he would kind of leave and then come back a couple of days or a week, sometimes months. And I had a feeling something was different early. And I can remember one particular incident when he came back from the road one day, and he had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar with him. Mm-hmm. And this might have been around 1972, 71. And it was just amazing seeing this tall guy coming in the house with my dad. When we were living in Brooklyn, New York, my neighbor downstairs was the great drummer Louis Hayes.
Yeah, wow.
So I spent a lot of time with him. It was just extraordinary.
Yeah. Can you remember like what age you first realized that that Freddie was such an important figure in the music?
Um, Honestly, I'd have to say probably I was like early teens
Mm.
because whenever I would tell them who my dad was, especially adults, their eyes would get real big, and it would just blow their minds. And
Yeah.
it was just a privilege, just to be his son.
Yeah. Yeah. And did you ever travel with him? Did he ever take you on the road, or was it like very separate? Did he do his thing and then come home and do the family thing?
Yeah, I went on the road with him a few times as a kid. Cincinnati, California. I was talking to a friend of mine, Ron Carter's son,
Hmm.
and he was hipping me to the fact how we would be at the Hollywood Bowl and would be running all around. I remember being backstage watching him on stage doing his thing. Periodically, like once a year growing up, he took me on tour with him.
Yeah. Did you ever, consider becoming a musician yourself?
It's funny. Dad always had a piano in the house, and he'd always be practicing on the piano, playing the trumpet. But one day, I looked at his lips, and
Mm.
they were like all pink,
Mm.
just from trumpet lips.
Yeah, yeah.
And I said to myself right then and there, I said, I don't think that's what I want to be.
Mm,
So
mm,
I
mm.
never, he never pushed it on me. He gave me piano lessons early, so
Yeah.
I have his ear. I can still to this day go to a piano and hear a song and just play it on the piano. That's the
Wow.
gift that he
Wow.
gave me. But as far as playing, man, I never gave it a shot, bro.
Yeah, yeah. Because Freddie had that lip injury in the 90s.
Hmm.
Did he was he spending more time, obviously spending more time at home? How was I've read a bunch of interviews with him that he did around that time, but how did you feel he changed after while he was not playing as much as he was before?
Yeah, well, I mean, he was really cranky. When you do that for so long, and there's such the high talent that he had and the high
Mm,
expectations,
yeah.
when it's taken away from you, you get depressed. You know, he would be around the house, kind of pacing. It was just a bad time for him,
Yeah.
because when it happened, the doctors told him to slow down and just to stop for a while, and he did for a minute,
Mm,
but then, him having that inside of him, he wanted just to keep on going, so he kept
yeah.
on going, and then he really split the lip, and he just had to stop playing for about a few years, man. So
Yeah.
it kind of hurt him psychologically,
Sure.
but he did make a comeback, but it
Yeah.
really hurt, the greatness of him.
Yeah. 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 Do you remember musicians? Did Freddie ever have any sort of playing sessions at the house? Do you remember musicians coming over and practicing and things like that?
Um, yeah, I mean, sometimes Stanley Turrentine would come over.
Mm,
Ron Carter would come over. They'd have jam sessions every now and then,
yeah.
but at that time I was a little too young. But
Mm,
he moved to California like in the mid '70s, and I spent summers out there, and I remember like all the great musicians coming over there, man, and kind of jamming, man. It was a wonderful.
wow. So, do you have any stories from any any of the great musicians that you met that have really kind of had an influence on you?
Um, Not really. I just remember just going on the road with him and
Mm,
guys like Herbie Hancock, and I just would watch cats like Ron Carter and Herbie Hancock and Dizzy Gillespie and all these guys, just how professional they were,
mm,
and I mean, just the way that they went about their business and how they practiced so much,
mm,
and then they go on the stage and just illuminate the stage. I remember one time, my dad did a concert when he was on a ferry ride going around the Statue of Liberty,
mm.
and I was just sitting in the audience with my fiance at the time. My mother was there, and just how he had like Herbie and Ron and all of them, and they were just playing so loud and so vibrant and so wonderful, and how the crowd was just so mesmerized,
Yeah.
and it was just really a beautiful thing, man.
Wow. That sounds amazing. And do you have any personal favorite albums? I mean, you have to say all of them because they're all great, but do you have one that really stands out to you? And the same question goes for a composition by Freddie, because as we all know, Freddie
Right
was
on.
a prolific composer.
The first album that I came across of my dad was Red Clay.
Yeah.
You know, I know being when I was younger, I kind of stumbled onto the closet, and he had all of these beautiful, wonderful albums in the closet. And the one that stood out in particular was the Red Clay album because it had like the red, what was it? Was it Mars or the Red Planet?
Yeah.
It could have been the sun, and it was so brilliant. And I love that album, of course, with Red Clay. But probably the best album that I love from him was Ready for Freddie.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, every one of those songs on that album was great.
Yeah.
Personally, he wrote 3 songs for me. Okay.
Yeah.
One was called Blues for Duane.
Yeah.
The other one was Little Sunflower, and the third one was Up Jump Spring.
Wow.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So I really have great love for those 3 compositions.
Yeah. Well, virtually every jazz musician in the world, I think, shares the same thought. I mean, those tunes, Up Jump Spring, Little Sunflower. In particular, Little Sunflower, because it's so simple and yet so expressive, and it's just a beautiful song. In fact, one of the students in the jazz school is actually going to be performing that one in the charity concert that we're doing at the end of term. So, yeah. So rest assured that they're all well versed in Freddie's music.
Yeah, it's amazing. That song is so melodic, you know, and so beautiful.
Yeah.
And Al Jarreau sung on that song also.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's such a beautiful, peaceful tune, man. And I'm absolutely in love with that song.
How has Freddie influenced you? Not necessarily, from like a father and son way, but in how much is his ability to sort of improvise? I mean, do you think, first of all, do you think that can be carried on into other aspects of life? And has that affected you?
Oh yeah, no question about it. Just the fact that he came from a small town in Indianapolis and had the intentions on becoming a star very early on, and then moved to New York, and just really worked hard to try to get to where he was, and just to be free. And you could tell that in his playings when he does his solos and his improvs. It just instilled in me early that you can do whatever you want and be whoever you want to be as long as you put hard work and dedication and just be true to the music. So I just carrying on the Hubbard name. I've always tried to be the best that I can be. And one thing that a lot of people have told me was that Freddie, he was such a musical genius, but at the same time, he was just so nice and kind to other artists and up and coming artists. And that's what I try to do, whenever, like, say you called me, and we met on Facebook, excuse me. And if anyone ever wants to know anything about my dad or wants to talk to me about my dad, I'm always there for him, for anyone. So that's, I think, what I got from my dad, his, just wanting to share his brilliance with other people.
Yeah, sure. I remember talking I was lucky enough to study with pianist James Williams. I don't know if you ever got to meet James.
Yeah, I met him.
Because he would literally call me whenever he saw any of these, great players, and including Freddie. He would call up and leave, half an hour answer phone messages saying, "Man, I saw Freddie Hubbard tonight, at the Vanguard," and and just what an amazing person he was, and James was in a sense an amalgamation of all these great players and great spirits that he met. But in particular, I remember him very distinctly saying how influenced he was by Freddie, not just as a musician, but as a human, and just his outlook on life and the way he treated other people. So I all the best jazz musicians, I think, have that. They have this ability to connect with people, because at the end of the day, I guess that's the business they're in. Connecting with the audience.
Yep. They strive so hard to get people to love their music, and I remember Freddie a lot of times talking about how he's not really sure that people love his music, and that blew me and a lot of people's minds. He was beloved by millions, and he's questioning if they love his music, man. I mean, but that's just the genius of them. You know, they want to put out their brilliance to people and want to be loved so much. And you hear all of these stories about all of these prima donnas that, you know, they don't want to get close to people and stuff like that. But Freddie loved his fans and loved fellow musicians. I remember he told me how when he came to New York, man, when he met Miles Davis, Miles wouldn't talk to him for about a year or so.
Wow.
And that's because, you know, that's like just because you're a rookie, you know, and you have to pave your way and you got to put in your dues.
Yeah.
You know, but from what I've heard from all the different musicians, Freddie just takes on everyone. He took on everyone and put them under his wing.
Yeah.
Cats like Christian McBride and all of these guys. He was just a wonderful person, and that's what I just try to be in life, you know.
So how do you spend your days now? You're obviously you're in charge of the estate, and do you how much input do you have with re-releasing material and putting, you know, I'm guessing there's a lot of unreleased material.
Right.
How does it work? Okay,
well, first of all, if Freddie owns the copyrights to all the music, you know, that's mine, you know, and we're going through a bunch of unreleased stuff, and pretty soon, hopefully late summer, we'll put out a new album of his unreleased stuff.
Wow.
But I have a lot of people, excuse me, from all over the world, call me up and say, okay, well, we have some of this stuff, and we want to come through you to see if we can release it. You know, when Freddie passed was like 2008, and then the estate went to my stepmom Briggy, and she passed like the following year. So it's relatively brand new to me, you know. So I just take offers from people, you know, and if they have some stuff and I listen to it and it's good, you know, I'll release it.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. So you it's kind of a learning curve then, because I mean, I'm running this podcast, and even just running a podcast and figuring out, can I play this? Do I have to get permission to do this? It must be a minefield for you.
It is, you know, but I try to surround myself with some good people.
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard of a cat named David Weiss.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. He helped bring my dad's career at the end of his career up, you know, with playing with him and managing him. So, like, if I have any real questions with the music game, you know, I can always go to him and he can tell me what's good and what's not. You know, it's all about surrounding yourself with some good people who know the business, man. And with that, you can't go wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. So where can we hear about any of these new upcoming releases and, you know, nice information on Freddie and all his albums, discography and things like that?
Yeah, I have a website that I created for my dad. It's called www.freddiehubbardmusic.com. And I have a store in there, and I have T-shirts and all stuff like that. And we just put out some new arrangements and some new transcripts on there. And
wow.
I'm definitely in the process of talking to some people right now, and we're going over some good music that hasn't been published yet. And that's the main source where I usually put the new discovery of the music on there.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I'm starting a new foundation. It's called Freddie Hubbard Music Foundation. And what I'm going to do with that, I'm going to give $1,000 or $2,000 to a worthy student of the music who's going to college to help them out.
Fantastic.
And definitely, just to help out the people like that. So that's some of the things that I'm doing right now.
That's great. That's so nice to do that. And, you know, I think just from, you know, as talking as a jazz musician myself, the impact that Freddie has had on the jazz world, and I mean, it's mind blowing. I don't think we'll ever really realize how much of an influence he's been, not just on jazz trumpet, but jazz and maybe, you know, music as a whole. I mean, such a creative force.
Oh yeah, no question about it. I have like saxophone players, drummers, all type of people just saying how much of an influence he was, and his style of music, you know, from the hard bop, and then he kind of went to like commercial music. But I mean, his influence changed the whole game. You know, he took it from cats like Clifford Brown and Miles Davis, and just took it to a whole different level. You know, and I'm real good friends with Woody Shaw's son. You know, and he was telling me how, you know, his dad was so influenced by Freddie and was challenged by Freddie. So Freddie put out brand of music that is going to be very hard for people to match. He played harder and longer than any trumpet player who ever played.
Absolutely.
And just his brand is just amazing. It's absolutely.
Yeah, and instantly recognizable. It's so unique. The sound, the tone, every aspect of it, fully developed. Yeah.
For sure.
Incredible. Incredible. Well, listen, it's been such a pleasure talking to you, and I really appreciate you taking the time. The students are going to be just blown away. They're such, they get it from me. I drill, all these great players, and Freddie included. They have no choice but to listen to them in my book. And, they'll be over the moon that this has happened, and fascinated to listen to it. So, thank you so much for doing the interview.
It's my pleasure, and thanks for schooling the youngsters on the greats, such as my dad, man. We have to keep this wonderful genre of music alive and study the great masters of the music like Freddie Hubbard and Miles Davis and Dizzy and all of these guys, man. And it's a pleasure talking to you, Wayne. Whenever you want to give me a call and you want to do it again, just let me know.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And we'll keep a very... close connection with the website, and we'll look forward to some these unreleased things coming out, and hopefully some remastering stuff. I know that recently that's I think one of the album, I can't remember which one it was offhand now, but remastered
I believe it was First Light, if I'm not mistaken.
First Light, yeah, that's the one. Yeah,
that was redigitized and remastered, and it came out wonderful.
Yeah.
So, but now that we're pretty tight, man, I'll definitely give you a heads up on what's coming out with my dad.
Yeah, that'd be great. Great stuff. Well, thanks again for giving us your time, and I'll look forward to doing it again. Let's stay in touch.
My pleasure, Wayne. Say hi to your students for me, man, and God bless you, brother.
Will do. Thanks, Duane.
All right, have a good one.
Take care. Cheers.
Okay, cheers.
So welcome to Passing Notes, and this week in the Learn to Play class we were taking a look at the fascinating subject of Cuban music. I think in jazz we often get the generic sort of Latin terminology, but what does that actually mean? Well, Latin is a very broad word. It can mean lots of different things, and I think in jazz sometimes we take that for granted. So I wanted to sort of put forward two types of what we call Latin grooves, I suppose, based on Cuban rhythms and based on the bossa nova, which we'll be doing next week. So this week we were checking out some of the Cuban clave rhythms and how that developed into salsa, which is a New York style based on both jazz and based on some of the more authentic Cuban music. So the Latin tinge, as it was called, has played a big part of jazz right since the very beginnings of the music in New Orleans. Jelly Roll Morton was using Latin-tinged rhythms in his piano playing in the early 1900s, and the habanero rhythm became part of the Big Four rhythm that is often associated with New Orleans music. And many pre-clave tunes were written in the 30s, which perhaps the most famous one is Juan Tizol's Caravan, which was made popular by the Duke Ellington Orchestra. So we were really concentrating on son claves, the reverse clave, and the forward clave, plus the rumbas, again reverse and forward, and the Afro 6/8 clave. So I'm going to just play you those different types of claves. So the first one is the son 2/3 clave. And then we have the opposite to that, which is the son 3/2 clave. And they're the sort of standard claves that were used. And the first Latin piece that was recorded in a sort of Afro Cuban or jazz piece that was recorded was a piece called Tenga, which was written in 1943, composed by Mario Bowser and recorded by Machito. Now the rumba clave is a slightly more syncopated version, so again we have reverse and forward. This is the 2-3 clave. And then we have the 3-2 clave. So we spent a lot of time just really getting used to feeling the groove of these claves. Now, I think feeling it is the best way of trying to interpret these grooves. I mean, I think if you're trying to count 1, 2, 3, 4 against these claves, in a sense you're missing the point, because it's about realigning where the groove happens. And if you start thinking about that in our Western terms, I think you lose a bit of magic to it. So I would say listen to these claves, learn them, clap them, make sure you understand them, and then just listen to lots of Latin music and go ahead and clap these rhythms, because what affects which one you use is the melody. So some melodies fit a 2-3 son clave and some melodies fit a 3-2 clave. So that's what they're based on. But I'm by no means an expert on this stuff, by the way. I used to play in a Latin band, and I sort of understand the role of the piano, and I know montunos, and I can play in the Latin, the sort of salsa style, but I'm by no means an expert on this stuff. So I'm going to get in an expert to come and delve in a bit deeper in the Learn to Play class. But this was a sort of introduction to the Cuban music. And here's some very basic practicalities of playing Latin jazz. The first one being, don't count a Latin tune in a swing feel. So in other words, don't count it in by saying 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, because that implies swing. So just count it in crotchets, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever the tempo is. And obviously when you're soloing, don't play swung, play in a straight feel. You can play in a swing feel, and that can give it a different sort of sound, but for the most part, you're playing in a straight 8 sort of feel. And if there is a clave, if you're playing with a band that has a percussion section, you need to be listening out to the clave. Listen out for that to bounce your ideas off of it, because that's what underpins the rhythmic guideposts, the groove of what's happening. And a quite good exercise is to try and apply claves to standards that you already know. We did it on Autumn Leaves, applying these different claves, because it makes you phrase things differently, makes you think about the melody in a different way as well. So that's a really interesting and fun thing to do. The other thing is, Monk's music has a special compatibility with claves. So if you know a few Monk tunes, try and play them in a Cuban style. And that's really good fun. So next week we're checking out Brazilian music, and we're checking out the bossa nova, because I wanted to make it clear that when someone calls a Latin, sometimes we don't just want the bog standard Latin groove. I think we take it for granted. And what I mean by that is this. Let me just run over to the piano. This sort of Latin groove. Which tends to be what we get when you call a Latin at a jam session. So there's more to it than that. We can have a salsa groove, we can have a bossa nova, a rumba, a mambo. There's so many different things that you can do. Not to mention other music from different islands, like the calypso and things like that. So it's really worth getting to grips with these different rhythms and these different styles, and knowing how to reproduce them, because it's just great fun. And it will then give you more freedom. You can just get away from that horrible sort of pseudo Latin lounge music that it is just tends to be what we call a Latin in the jazz sort of world. I always say that Latin musicians have really, really taken lots and lots of things from jazz. In fact, most Latin players are great jazz players, but it doesn't really work the other way around. There's only a handful of great jazz players that are also great Latin players. So there seems to be a little bit of a gap there, and that's me included. I'm not a great Latin player at all. It's something that I'm studying, and something I hope to get better at. But yeah, I think it's worth checking out. Check out lots of Latin jazz music, listen to it, try and transcribe it, and play along, clap the claves, and really get into the feel of the music. It's great music, it's feel-good music, and with the summer coming up, it's just perfect music to listen to on those long summer evenings. Okay, there we go. So that's been Passing Notes. Join us again next week, where we'll be taking a look at the bossa nova rhythms. So thanks for tuning in, and stick around because we've got some great music coming up from Freddie Hubbard. So I'm afraid it's that time again where I have to say goodbye, but as ever, thank you so much for tuning in and being with us for this episode 13. Unlucky for some, but certainly not for us, and hopefully not for you. So I'd like to say a big thank you to Duane for lending us his time to talk about his father, Freddie Hubbard, just for a fantastic interview. Thank you very much. It was a privilege to talk to you, and let's do it again sometime. Thank you to Mike, the glue of Brighton Jazz School, as ever, for putting the podcast together. And thank you to all of my listeners for writing in and just being very, very cool. And we really appreciate it. It does make a big difference, you writing in. And you can do that at www.brightonjazzschool.com/podcast. And you can stay in touch on Facebook. We have a Twitter feed as well. You can subscribe to us on iTunes. We're pretty much everywhere, and which is a good thing, I hope. So thanks for tuning in, and you can write to me directly. Almost forgot that one. It's brightonjazzschool@gmail.com. And as ever, there's a donation button on the website if you'd like to show your appreciation to keep this going and keep this a great podcast and to develop it further as well. So I'd like to leave you with this wonderful track by Freddie Hubbard, and I'd like to dedicate this to Mike because he's going to be performing this one hopefully in the final performance for this term. And this is from the album Backlash, and it's called Little Sunflower. So this is your host Wayne Mcconnell signing off, and we'll see you next week.